it's going to be an interesting election. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about, I spoke a little bit about this at downtown Pachyderms when they had their candidates dinner. And I know the candidates that are here heard a little bit of that speech, but most of you don't go to downtown Pachyderms. Shameless plug, I'll be speaking there after the election, the Thursday after the election. If you want to hear about the district clerk's office. Tonight I'm going to talk about elections. But before I do that, just to clear up anything, how many of you know the difference between the district clerk and the county clerk?
I do.
Oh, come on. Well, Stan Stannard is your current county clerk. And for years it was Beverly Kaufman. That's where you go if you're going to pick up a marriage certificate, a deed of property, or you go to probate a will. And most importantly, he handles your elections. So any issues with the upcoming election, please talk to him. Okay? Your district clerk is where you go if you're suing somebody, if you're being sued, you get in trouble with the law, the DA files their criminal charges against you with my office. If you're filing for divorce, I'm sorry. Child support payments get paid through this office. And for most of you who will never see the courthouse for any of those reasons, I'm responsible for jury duty. So as your district clerk, if you ever have any issues regarding the courthouse or issues regarding jury duty, or you're interested in grand jury duty, I'm not very directly responsible for that, but we're always looking for volunteers. That aside, now let's talk about the election. In 2008, you saw a record number of new voters voting in the presidential election, both Democrat and Republican. On the Democrat side, you saw some conservative Democrats build a machine for registering voters, for contacting those voters after the primary and after once the general election was set, and a machine for making sure that they, in turn, got their friends and neighbors to vote. Yes, it was a historic election, but make no mistake, in Harris County, there was a large, paid-for, engineered machine to turn out their vote. In 2010, a trial lawyer named Steve Mostyn, you may have seen his commercials about likeattorney.com, doors open, doors closed, make sure you get your storm insurance claim and so forth. He spent over $1 million in Harris County alone, not to mention the governor's race, redoing that machine. He wanted to do it his way. And when he did it his way, he of course broke that machine. And they went to a lot of old school tactics that have long since been antiquated as far as paying certain folks to get out the vote. And that failed. And it failed miserably in 2010. That machine that was built by conservative Democrats fell apart. Here we are in 2012, and that same machine, again being funded by Steve Mostyn and other trial lawyers, are relying on old school tactics to try to get out the vote. Needless to say, they are not organized. Not only are they not organized, but they're not really spending the capital on the right areas to get those same Democrats from 2008 re-registered to vote. Typically, a Republican owns their own home, lives in the same spot for the last 10 to 15 to 20 years, and does not need to re-register to vote. Whereas the base in Houston for the Democratic Party typically lives in an apartment or lives with a relative and is therefore moving about the county. But when you move, if you do not timely re-register to vote, you may be left out of the election entirely. And as of last Tuesday, October 9th, it was the final day to update, register, or change your voter registration. That machine that existed in 2010 was not available in 2008, was not available in 2010, and is still not available in 2012 to make up for the existing voters, much less the new people moving from Michigan, California, New York, Indiana, Illinois, and the breadbasket to Texas for the jobs that Texas has, particularly Houston. We're not just talking about oil and gas jobs. We're talking about the private sector. We're talking about service industry, tax, law, you name it. We had the the technology jobs, we have them by the droves in Houston. Yes, the economy has been stagnant, but that is the reason why those states are moving, their population is moving to Texas. And yet that machine that was in place for the historic election in 2008 did not first broke apart in 2010. It was never rebuilt for 2012. That being said, that does not mean that the Democratic base isn't excited in their own way for this election. Yes, the debates have been interesting, and yes, the polling overall in Harris County shows a much lesser enthusiasm for the Democrats than it was in 2008. And I say that so that way we don't get complacent and say, oh, we haven't won. This is a Republican county. Away we go. No. We still have to maintain our efforts and works in communicating what we are about as Republicans. Why do we stand for certain things on the platform? And communicate that if there's something that somebody disagrees with on the platform, that can be changed. It's not set in stone. There's a process that begins with the precinct chair, which begins in the senatorial district, that goes all the way through the county, to the state, to the national convention, to change the Republican Party. The Republican Party today is not the same Republican Party of 1935. The Democrat Party of today is not the same party of the Democrats of 1935. There is a process to change what you like and don't like about either party. And so tell your friends as you are reaching out to them that we are the party of jobs, that we are the party of making sure that we don't spend more than we make, and that we leave something for the next generation down the road. Yes, we care about individual rights. Yes, we care about individual civil liberties and so forth. We also have to make sure that the programs that we put in place are paid for. Otherwise, it is a lie for a safety net, an illusion. Going back to the infrastructure, because that machine is broken and the Republican machine has been maintained, we're able to turn out our early vote. We're able to turn out our base. Now we just need to make sure we continue to sell that message to the other side so that we get the crossover votes like we did in 1980 from the unions, where we proved to them that Jimmy Carter was going to continue to lose their jobs, or Ronald Reagan was going to create those jobs. And with the exception of the oil bust in Houston, that proved true for Texas. The same message that we sold in 1988, where if you go with Dukakis, we're going to have that same Jimmy Carter trend. Or if you go with George Bush, we'll continue with the economic recovery, the solid economic recovery that occurred over the 80s. It is imperative that we go to the areas that we're not comfortable with to tell people you need to vote. And not only should you vote, but you need to vote Republican. I was surprised at the shock on El Franco Lee's face when I showed up to Acres Homes on National Night Out to talk about just the district clerk's office. No politics, just the district clerk's office. It's okay to go to areas that are not typically Republican and say, look, there is another way. There is an option. As my dear friend in the office likes to say, no matter how thin the pancake is, there's two sides. And there is another side to the coin about being conservative, about being for smaller government, about being for fiscal responsibility, so that we have something to pay for the rainy day issues that go on down the road. And they do happen. How many of you are voting Republican for the first time? How many of you are voting Republican for the last 5 years? How about the last 10 years? My message is not a new message, right? But what is the difference between their party and our party here in Houston? We have stayed on point as far as talking to our neighbors, talking to our friends, and making sure that even if we know that they're always going to vote Democrat, so what? We're going to talk to them and say, look, I want you to at least take a look at this candidate over here, who's a good Republican. This candidate over here, who has maintained his house in order. This candidate over here, who made sure not to spend all the money, especially when it was prudent to, politically prudent to do so. One by one, that's how we make our converts. That's how we sell somebody, by going to them and saying, look, I know that you've always X, Y, Z, but will you at least listen to me on this? And a number of times over that material will eventually get them to go, yeah, you know what? It hasn't been working this way. Maybe I should take a look at this other option. So for you candidates out there, remember that that machine is broken for the Democrats. Our machine has maintained its forward progress. And if, as long as we don't get complacent, we just continue to drive that ball forward, we will win in November. I predict a sweep in every race except for one. That candidate's not here, so I won't mention that race. But I predict that we're going to win by a wide margin. The internal polling, which is not my polling to share, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, is that the Republicans are polling from the DA's race all the way to the bottom of the ballot, 55-41. Solid 55-41. If they know the name of the candidate, the polling goes higher in the R direction and lower in the Democrat direction. But if they don't know Michael Wolf, they don't know Bud Wiesendep, hey, that's got an R next to their name, I'm voting for that guy. And that says something about our base, our grassroots, talking about the issues and concerns of what matters to Houstonians, what matters to people in Harris County. Valerie, how long do I got?
You have a few more minutes. You're good.
Oh, I'll leave time for questions. One of the things that was most successful in 2008 in the contested races, remember we didn't win a whole lot of judicial races, where the grassroots adopted a judge. For the precinct chair, their neighbors, the senatorial district chair, grabbed a judge and said, look, I want you to vote straight Republican, but I especially want you to vote for Renee McGee. I want you to vote straight Republican, but I especially want you to vote for Bud Wiesendep. I want you to vote straight Republican, but I want you to remember my friend, James Lombardino. He's not on the ballot this time, but I'm using him as an example. And by doing that, we were able to ensure in specifically tight races, Patricia Kerrigan being one, that we made sure that that judge, if nobody else, won down ballot. Going back to the top of the ballot, why did Ed Emmett win? Why did Paul Bettencourt win? Why did Teresa Chang lose? Or why did Mike Stafford lose? Ed Emmett and Paul Bettencourt had crossover Democrat support. And they got that by selling them on the idea of not spending all the money, keeping your fiscal house in order, making sure that you had a measured plan while still maintaining those core values on individual civil liberties, individual rights, and so forth. We just want to make sure we can pay for that. Ed Emmett even more so because he actively sought that crossover vote, whereas Paul Bettencourt earned it passively by just doing a good job as a Republican. Whereas Teresa Chang and Mike Stafford not only had some issues, Teresa Chang had no personal issues like Mike Stafford did, but they had enough issues regarding their offices that people didn't feel comfortable crossing the aisle to vote for them. And in a year where you have straight R and straight D, they lost without that crossover support. So if you see certain candidates, one in particular that might lose in November on the Republican side, it is solely because the Democrat earned that crossover Republican support. And so if that is what has happened, that means we need to work on our candidates to make sure that they are truly selling that message on what to keep our house in order, how not to spend all the money, and how to make sure that we save for a rainy day. That's on us as a party. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we've got an election in November here. It is going to take the same grassroots effort that led us to win in 2010, led us to win in 2006, 2004, 2002, 2000, which is making sure we get our neighbors, our friends to vote, and get their neighbors and friends to vote as well. It's even better if you can help them identify who's Republican and Democrat, but I'd rather you didn't do that, because we gain more long-term converts by just letting them vote their conscience while educating them on the issues. And slowly but surely, we can get them to vote all are today, but they may flip-flop the next election, or we can get them to win on certain elections until they comfortably, on their own, come to the realization that they too are a Republican, regardless of race, color, or creed. Any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
I got two questions. Number one, how do you know that the Democratic machine is broken? And number two, what percent of Democrats and Republicans vote to stroke their ticket?
The percentage, that's a standard question. I wish he was here because he'd give you a more accurate number. How I know for sure that the Democratic machine is broken is that the consultants and the people that built that machine were all pushed to the side in 2010 and basically threw up their hands in protest and left the political scene entirely and are now working for private oil companies or have moved out of the state of Texas entirely. And instead, the Garnet Colemans of the world, along with Steve Mostyn, have decided to go through these old school tactics, turn out their vote, and they're trying it again in 2012, and it's not working. And the way that you can prove that out is looking at the voter registration from Don Sumner's office on who is registering more new voters and who is re-registering the existing voters. It's down on the Democrat side and it's up on the Republican side. Now, ballot by mail request is a different matter entirely. And per standard, as of 2 days ago, we're actually historically down on the Republican side on ballot by mail requests. We typically have 2 to 1 on Democrats. And right now we're about realistically 55, 45 for Democrats on ballot by mail requests and returns. So we need to work on that. If you know folks that requested the ballot by mail, we need to get them to, we have them the forms up here, we need to get them to request it, make sure they turn it back in, and make sure it's them that's turning it in.